guys, it's a new week, which means it's time for another week in review, where of course I'm going to share with you guys the graphic novels, comics, whatever you guys want to call them, trades. I know they go by so many different names, but I hope you guys like zombies, because that's kind of going to be what some of these books are about. The week is 28 Days Later, London Calling, and this is volume 1. I do not know if there are any other volumes to this. And I only say that because I read this and it ended on a cliffhanger and I was like, what? Well, anyways, this is supposed to take place between 28 Days Later and its sequel, 28 Weeks Later. It kind of picks up, you know, the black girl from the first film. And I don't know what happened to the other guy. They don't show him for some reason. They don't explain what happened to him or anything. It's just this girl. Like, but we know at the end of the last movie they picked him up too, and some little kid, I think. I don't remember because it's been a while since I've seen it. I own the film, but it's been a while since I've seen it. But they don't fill in that hole. Like, what happened to that dude? Why isn't he in here? But then again, this book just opens up a whole nother can of worms. I mean, I have to say, I absolutely love those movies. But this book just opened up a whole nother can of worms. They're going back to London for some reason. This American journalist wants to go, and he needs a guide. So I think her name is Selena. Or is it Serena? I don't remember, but he asks her to take him, and of course, you know, they run into the infected. And this had more questions than it answered anything. So, I know a lot of people on Goodreads, like, they're like, oh my god, it's a 4-star book. But I gotta be right up front with you guys, I didn't think this was a 4-star book. It's just a 3-star book. Because, like I said, it left a lot of stuff open. Like, it didn't answer a lot of questions. It just ended on a cliffhanger. Like, I don't even know if there's a second volume to this. Like, that's it? I mean, and it doesn't even lead into the second movie. So, yeah, I only rated that one 3 out of 5 stars. After that, I picked up Deadpool and Cable Ultimate Collection Volume 2. I did read Volume 1 maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. It's been a while since I've read that one. But I do have to say, this one was much better than the first one. This just had a better cameos, I would say. Daredevil's in this, because this crosses over with the Civil War. It's kind of, they bring in a shameless plot with Apocalypse. And it's kind of cool because in the intro to the story, Deadpool and Apocalypse are talking, and he's like, yeah, we need to boost our ratings on this book, so that's why we brought you into the story. So I thought that was it was kind of cheesy, but it was kind of cool, you know. Of course, they're just really senseless stories. I mean, but the one with Apocalypse was kind of a good story because it kind of hinted at that Cable was the reason why Apocalypse keeps coming back. It's all his fault. But, you know, aside from that story, the rest of it was just okay. And I have to say, guys, this is another book that a lot of people really enjoyed. They rated this like 4 stars and up. But I don't know. I just don't see it. Like, I individually like these two characters, like, separately from each other. I like Deadpool. I like Cable. But when you put them together in a book, they just kind of clash. Like, they just don't make any sense. And as a book, I really don't... You know, I only rated this 3 out of 5 stars. I might read the Volume 3 to see if I like that one or not. Volume 5, and I read it. And I have to say, this is still a space opera. It's like a Romeo and Juliet in space. Except they have a kid, and... I don't know. It's at the beginning of this, I was kind of like, yeah, this series is starting to get a little tiring, you know. It's just not, you know. But then I kept reading it, and I'm like, okay, they're still keeping it good. So I did rate this 4 out of 5 stars still. But I do feel like the series is starting to get tired. You know, like it's not really all that. It seems like it's too. It's just. It's hard to put into words, but it just seems like it's not really going anywhere too quickly, and it's not that as entertaining as it used to be. But it's still good, I guess. That's why I'm saying I'm not sure if I really want to go and pick up Volume 4, because am I really missing much? Now this, on the other hand, I have read Neil Gaiman before, but I have never read any of his Sandman books. I have to say, upon first reading this, I thought it was gonna suck. And like, the first story has to do with some coming of age thing, and like this legend of a princess falling in love with Morpheus, basically. And I was like, this isn't that great. But then as it got on further, there's like these little background stories like that are going on. One involves this girl who is called the Vortex. And then there's another one about a guy who just refuses to die, which I loved that story. I thought that was really cool, and Morpheus would go and meet him in the bar every once in a while and talk to him and ask him how he's doing. There was another part of the story where it was about a serial killer convention. That was kind of interesting too. But overall, I thought this was beautifully written. You can really tell that Neil Gaiman kind of does some research when he writes about certain things. So it made me like interested in this story. I totally skipped over Volume 1. I don't know why the library doesn't have it. They have every single volume of the Sandman series run but Volume 1. So I'm going to try to track down Volume 1 to see exactly what I missed out on, because they mentioned something about the Sandman being out of play. But I do have to say this was very enjoyable. I also want to throw out there that I would not recommend this for everyone. I'm going to say, even if you think you're a fan of Neil Gaiman, I wouldn't say that this is for you. Because Neil Gaiman is such a varied writer, and I know it's trendy and it's cool to say you like Neil Gaiman, but if you're not into, like, you know, thrillers or mature horror type stuff, I really don't think this is for you. But if you are into, like, crazy, weird horror type stuff, then definitely check this out. I did rate this 4 out of 5 stars. It's worth picking up. I plan on reading the rest of the books in this series. Okay, up next we have The Walking Dead Compendium 3. This collects issues 97 through 144. Now, before I started reading this, I had read a number of volumes that followed the Compendium 2. So I would say about a third of this I had already read. But I will admit that before I started reading this, because it had been quite some time since I had read those, I kind of flipped through those and kind of tried to refresh my memory as to what had gone on. Now, this starts out with the meeting of Negan and his saviors. Of course, that whole matter gets resolved in this volume, or this compendium, I should say. This will probably be my biggest book I read for this year, because every time I read one of these, I usually can't read another book that'll surpass, like, these, because they're 1,088 pages long. Really, really heavy, so yes, they're quite strenuous on the wrists when you're reading these. I don't want to say too much, I don't want to ruin it. If you guys have not read these, I don't want to spoil what happens with Negan and his gang. But there is a time of peace, and then after the time of peace, they come across a new threat. And I'm going to call them zombie skins, because really, these people, they kind of hide amongst the dead, and it's a whole new threat. So I can't really wait to see how that's going to turn out, so I'm going to have to figure out if there are any more volumes that have not, you know, that go past the Compendium 3. Because, of course, I can't wait for, like, Compendium 4 to come out, so. And I have to say, I rated this 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Really, really worth reading. It's worth checking out if you are a fan of The Walking Dead. After that, I picked up the conclusion to Alex+Ada. This was a little bit different than I expected. It did turn out a little differently than I had. I mean, I kind of had an idea what was going to happen to them, but I really thought that, I thought it was going to turn out a different way. But, of course, I still don't like the artwork. I think the artwork looks really kind of funny. But this was it seemed like it was a little too rushed. It seems like for some reason they chose to end this series, and when they did, it felt really rushed. But it did have a nice, sweet ending. So I will have to say, this kind of reminded me of I Am Robot with the whole robot rights things. And I have to say I did rate this 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, up next we have Days Missing. And they claim that this is tied with Roddenberry, that this is supposed to be his comics line. And I don't know if that means he gave them the basis for the story, but I've never heard of the writer who did this. And it did have an interesting concept. The concept is that there's this being who's like this guardian of Earth. And when apocalyptic scenarios happen, he has the ability to find out how to turn the events around and to save that thing and like replay the day and like warn people on how to fix it. So it did have like a story involving Mary Shelley and the Frankenstein monster, that supposedly it really happened. There was an Ebola type outbreak. While this was a cool concept, I think it is a cool idea to have like some guy be able to go in time and alter like events. It sounds like a great idea, right? But I just found this so hard to get into. I just couldn't get into it, and honestly, guys, I only rated this 2 out of 5 stars. It just wasn't for me. While the concept of time travel and changing events sounds great, but it fell flat for me. After that, I read X-Men Legacy Lost Legions. This takes place after the Age of X storyline, I think, because these X-Men have arrived back from that dimension or whatnot, and Legion has lost some of his personalities. If you're not familiar with who Legion is, he is David Haller. He is Professor X's son, and he's an Omega class mutant. Of course, he's got like all these abilities, and each split personality has a power set in itself, and like 6 of these people, like from inside him, somehow they got separated from him when they came back from the Age of Apocalypse dimension, and they have to try to retrieve them and put them back in David Haller, who is Legion. So, I mean, it was interesting to see all the different power sets, like a few of the different power sets. And I guess he wears this, like, bracelet wrist strap thing, and he can key in a certain number, and that number corresponds to a personality with a power set. And it's kind of interesting to see this in action, because I always thought Legion was kind of an interesting character, but I never read too many books with him in them. So it was interesting in that aspect, but it just wasn't that great. I only rated this one 3 out of 5 stars. It was just, okay, so if you've reached this far into the video, I've only got 2 more books to share with you guys. Hopefully, and I'm pretty sure that this one is not as long as last week's video. The last 2 books I got to share with you guys are 3-star books. I only rated them 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. The first one is Avengers A vs. X. And this was kind of, at times, this was kind of cool to see, because I totally missed out on this storyline. I only read, like, 1 book in this series so far, and this was my second opportunity to read another book from that series. Anyways, there's the Phoenix Force, which, you know, Jean Grey, it had inhabited her at one time. It's a planet-destroying, like, force of nature. and it has decided to come to Earth. The Avengers decide to try to intercept it before it gets to Earth. They manage to sidetrack it, but then there's kind of like a jump in events, and it just... I know from previous, like, having known in the other story I read, that some of the Avengers, or not the Avengers, some of the X-Men had received the Phoenix Force, and they're kind of, like, egotistical, out of control. So it was kind of neat to see some of the events that I just didn't know had happened. So that's why I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Other than that, it felt really rushed. It had a lot of holes in it, like it just didn't make sense at times. Some of the characters just didn't act like you typically expect, like Hawkeye and Spider-Woman are having a fling, and they're just busy making out while talking to somebody else. I just thought that was just untypical of those characters, and that was another reason why I just thought it was a 3 out of 5 star book. After that, and this will be my final book, is Ghost Riders Heaven's on Fire. Of course, you know there's Johnny Blaze, but then he's got a brother named Danny Ketch, and they're both Ghost Riders. And like I said before when I reviewed another Ghost Rider book, I've never really read any Ghost Riders, so this is kind of like all new to me. Has very religious, like, undertones to it. Heaven and hell and the Antichrist. A lot of it was just very lame. A lot of the religious doctrine and, you know, the shameless attempts to try to make it seem exciting. I really didn't get anything out of this book until, like, the very end, when there were, like, all the Ghost Riders who have since passed decided to fight the demons of hell trying to enter heaven. That was the best part of this book. And that's why, sadly, I only rated this 3 out of 5 stars. I just didn't think it was that good a story. I don't know, maybe if I was a religious person, I would have got maybe more out of it. I don't know. I just know that I felt that it wasn't that great of a story. So that is my latest week in review for this week. I hope I introduced you guys to some books that you might not have otherwise found out about. Or if you've read any of these, you know, let me know what you thought of them down below. Thank you for watching. Until next time, later, guys.